Welcome back, everybody. It is second second Peter. It is Wednesday, July 15th, 2026, and we left off on Second Peter 2. We'll just pick it up on verse 1. Oh, I didn't say my prayer. Hold on one sec. Amen. Okay. Verse 1. But false prophets also arose among the people, just as there will be false teachers among you, who will secretly bring in destructive heresies, even denying the master who bought them, bringing upon themselves swift destruction. And many will follow their sensuality, and because of them, the way of truth will be blasphemed. And in their greed, they will exploit you with false words. Their condemnation from long ago is not idle, and their destruction is not asleep. For if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but cast them into hell and committed them to chains of gloomy darkness to be kept until the judgment, if he did not spare the ancient world, but preserved Noah, a herald of righteousness, with 7 others, when he brought a flood upon the world of the ungodly, if by turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah to ashes he condemned them to extinction, making them an example of what is going to happen to the ungodly, and if he rescued righteous Lot, greatly distressed by the sensual conduct of the wicked, for as that righteous man lived among them day after day, he was tormenting his righteous soul over their lawless deeds that he saw and heard. Then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from trials, and to keep the unrighteous under punishment until the day of judgment, and especially those who indulge in the lust of defiling passion and despise authority. Bold and willful, they do not tremble as they blaspheme the glorious ones, whereas angels, though greater in might and power, do not pronounce a blasphemous judgment against them before the Lord. But these, like irrational animals, creatures of instinct, born to be caught and destroyed, blaspheming about matters of which they are ignorant, will also be destroyed in their destruction, suffering wrong as the wage for their wrongdoing. They count it pleasure to revel in the daytime. They are blots and blemishes, reveling in their deceptions, while they feast with you. They have eyes full of adultery, insatiable for sin. They entice unsteady souls. They have hearts trained in greed, accursed children. Forsaking the right way, they have gone astray. Forsaking the right way, they have gone astray. They have followed the way of Balaam, the son of Beor, who loved gain from wrongdoing, but was rebuked for his own transgression. A speechless donkey spoke. A speechless donkey spoke with human voice and restrained the prophet's madness. What? They have followed the way of Balaam, the son of Beor, who loved gain from wrongdoing, but was rebuked for his own transgression. A speechless donkey spoke with human voice and restrained the prophet's madness. All right, you lost me. What's going on here? Explain. This verse is a direct reference to one of the most famous and unusual stories in the Old Testament, the story of Balaam and his talking donkey, found in Numbers 22. To understand why the New Testament author Peter brings this up in 2 Peter 2:16, it helps to look at who Balaam was and what exactly happened on that road. Okay. The backstory from the Old Testament book of Numbers, chapter 22. Balaam was a non-Israelite prophet for hire, known for his spiritual power. The king of Moab, terrified of the massive wandering population of Israelites, offered Balaam a massive fortune if he would travel down to curse them. God explicitly told Balaam not to go, but because the king kept offering more money and honor, Balaam kept asking God until God essentially said, "Fine, go, but only speak what I tell you." Balaam's heart, however, was clearly set on getting paid. So wait, so he was a non-Israelite prophet for hire. I mean, prophet for hire. Breaking down the verse, it says, "But was rebuked for his own transgression. As Balaam rode his donkey to meet the king, God sent the angel of the Lord to stand in the road with a drawn..." God sent the angel of the Lord to stand in the road with a drawn sword to stop him. Balaam was so blinded by his greed and eagerness for fame that he couldn't see the spiritual reality right in front of him. A speechless donkey spoke with human voice. While Balaam was completely blind to the angel, his donkey saw the sword-bearing warrior clear as day. The donkey panicked and turned off the road, crushed Balaam's foot against a wall, and finally just lay down under him. Enraged, Balaam beat the poor animal 3 times. At that point, God miraculously gave the donkey the ability to speak. She essentially said, "What have I ever done to you to deserve this? Haven't I been your loyal donkey your whole life?" And restrained the prophet's madness. The madness Peter is talking about is the spiritual insanity of chasing wealth at the expense of obeying God. As soon as the donkey spoke, God opened Balaam's eyes. He saw the angel standing there with the sword and realized the donkey had actually saved his life. If the donkey hadn't stopped, the angel would have killed Balaam on the spot. Oh, dang. Okay. Why Peter uses it here. In the context of 2 Peter 2, Peter is warning the early church about false teachers. He explicitly says these teachers have followed the way of Balaam, the son of Beor, who loved gain from wrongdoing. Peter uses Balaam as the ultimate warning symbol, a religious leader who lets greed warp his judgment until he behaves with less spiritual awareness than a literal beast of burden. The ultimate irony of the story, and the point Peter is driving home, is that God had to use a completely uneducated, naturally speechless animal to teach a famous, highly paid spiritual prophet how to see clearly. What does it mean to be a prophet for hire? How does that work? Not a prophet, a prophet hire. To understand what a prophet for hire was, you have to look at the religious marketplace of the ancient Near East. Blah, blah, blah. A prophet for hire functioned very much like a modern specialized consultant, defense contractor, or high-stakes lawyer. Fees for divination. It was standard practice to bring a payment, sometimes called a divination fee, just to secure a meeting with a seer or prophet. What? How they worked. A professional prophet didn't just sit around waiting for a sudden vision. They used specific techniques to pull information from the spiritual world or bend it to their client's will. These included sacrifice and ritual, omens and augury, execration rituals, cursing, formally pronouncing curses. In the ancient world, words were thought to carry physical weight. A curse spoken by a recognized prophet was viewed as a psychological weapon that would demoralize the enemy and cause their gods to abandon them. This professional framework is exactly why Balaam ran into such disaster with the God of Israel. In the ancient pagan view, gods could be bought, flattered, or manipulated if you just offered the right sacrifice and used the right magic words. Balaam treated Yahweh, God, like the other deities he usually dealt with. That's wait, so this implies that Balaam was able to interact with other gods beside Yahweh. But what are these spiritual entities supposed to be? Are they demons? Who are these other gods? The short answer is yes. The New Testament writers directly view these entities as demons, but the way ancient biblical writers understood the spiritual realm is much broader and more complex than modern pop culture suggests. Okay. To the ancient biblical authors, Balaam wasn't interacting with figments of human imagination. He was dealing with real, rebellious spiritual powers. The ancient lens, the sons of God. In the Old Testament worldview, God, Yahweh, has a supreme heavenly court made up of created spiritual beings. In Hebrew, these beings are often called Elohim, spiritual beings, or the sons of God. According to the text like Deuteronomy 32:8, after humanity rebelled at the Tower of Babel, God disinherited the pagan nations and assigned these lesser spiritual beings to govern over them. While keeping Israel as his own direct possession. However, these assigned spiritual governors rebelled. Instead of pointing the nations back to the true Creator, they accepted worship for themselves, becoming the patron gods of empires like Egypt, Babylon, and Moab. Okay. Wait, so these sons of gods that rebelled are separate entities from the angels that rebelled alongside Lucifer? Is that what it's saying? Sounds like that's what it's saying. Yes, in the original biblical worldview, they are separate entities and represent distinct rebellions. Modern pop culture often squishes the entire spiritual realm into a single backstory. Lucifer rebels before creation, takes a third of the angels with him, and those are the demons. But the writers of the Old and New Testament actually tracked 3 separate rebellions in the spiritual realm. Here is how the ancient Israelite worldview separated these entities. Okay, so there's the Eden rebellion, the serpent / Lucifer. The Nachash, the shining serpent in Genesis 3, or the figure later identified as Satan / Lucifer. Okay. The offense, he was a high-ranking divine being who rebelled out of pride and envy, seeking to overthrow God's order and tricking humanity into losing their immortal status. The result, he became the ultimate adversary, the prince of this world. The Genesis 6 rebellion, the Watchers / angels, the entities here, a specific class of heavenly beings called Watchers or angels. The offense, Peter and Jude both write about this explicitly. 2 Peter 2:4 and Jude 1:6, these were angels who did not stay within their own position of authority, but left their proper dwelling. According to Genesis 6, they crossed cosmic boundaries to mingle with human women, corrupting human genetics and teaching humanity forbidden knowledge, like warfare and sorcery. The result, God immediately threw these specific angels into chains of gloomy darkness in Tartarus, the abyss, which we've read about before, which was interesting, to be held until final judgment. They are not currently free to roam the earth. Oh, okay, so these watchers are in Tartarus, but the angels that rebelled with Satan are the demons that are on earth now. They're free for whatever reason. God allows it. That's the reason. The Tower of Babel rebellion, the sons of God, the territorial gods. How did I never know this? I thought we had covered this. That's interesting. I mean, I knew about, not really, obviously not. I knew about number 1. I kind of knew about 2, but I kind of smushed them together. I never knew there was a third. That's cool. Cool in a intriguing way. The entities, the B'nai Ha-Elohim, sons of God, who made up God's heavenly council. The offense, as mentioned earlier, when humanity rejected God at Babel, God assigned these high-ranking sons of God to govern the 70 pagan nations. But instead of directing those nations to honor the Creator, these entities accepted worship for themselves. The result, they became the principalities and powers ruling over pagan empires, like the demonic entities Balaam was hired to manipulate. How they all mix together today. If they started out as different groups, why do we call them all demons today? Over time, Jewish and early Christian writers began using the word demon as a blanket term for any hostile, non-human spiritual entity. Think of it like an organized crime syndicate. Satan is the top boss, the head of the Eden Rebellion. The fallen sons of God are like territorial cartel leaders. Are they even working together, though? They are separate entities with different origins, but they are all working toward the same goal, keeping humanity from returning to the true God. Let's see. So are these fallen demons ultimately what turned into other belief systems like Ganesha and the Roman gods and the Greek gods, and the Aztec gods, all them people, Quetzalcoatl, all that stuff? Yes, from the perspective of the biblical writers, this is exactly what happened. In the ancient biblical worldview, the gods of the Greek, Roman, Egyptian, and other global pantheons were not considered empty fairy tales or mere psychological projections. They were understood to be real, rebellious spiritual entities, those fallen sons of God who successfully masqueraded as supreme deities to demand the worship of humanity. The Greek and Roman connection. The early Christians lived right in the middle of the Greco-Roman world, surrounded by temples to Zeus, Jupiter, Apollo, and Venus. They didn't view these gods as harmless mythology. The Apostle Paul and the early church fathers took the Old Testament view that behind the beautiful marble statues of the Greek and Roman gods were active demonic forces. When someone offered a sacrifice at a temple of Apollo, Paul argued they were entering into communion with a real malevolent spiritual being, stating, what pagans sacrifice they offer to demons and not to God. I do not want you to be participants with demons, 1 Corinthians 10:20. That's pretty wild. The mechanics of deception. How did these entities pull this off? They exploited humanity's natural, God-given desire for worship and twisted it. In ancient times, people believed gods were geographically bound. There was a prince of Persia and a prince of Greece, mentioned in Daniel 10:20 in the Old Testament. These entities establish themselves as the spiritual patrons of specific empires, demanding worship. I guess that explains how, like, because these, well, heck, I don't know. I would need a map. Demanding worship by presenting themselves as providers of rain, war victories, or fertility, they convinced nations to build altars to them. The personality of the gods. If you read Greek or Roman mythology, the gods are deeply flawed. They are proud, lustful, vengeful, and cruel. That's true. The Bible implies this makes perfect sense because these quote-unquote gods were actually fallen, corrupted spiritual rebels, reflecting their own broken nature onto the religions they inspired. Third, global pantheons and the biblical narrative. This same framework applies to other ancient or complex polytheistic systems throughout history. Whether it's the ancient Egyptian pantheon, where God explicitly stated he was executing judgment on all the gods of Egypt during the Exodus, or historical Eastern traditions. The biblical narrative argues that while the cultural imagery, names, and artistic representations, like the elephant-headed Ganesha in Hinduism or the multi-armed gods of other cultures, are shaped by human culture and art, the underlying spiritual reality driving people away from the one true creator remains the same, which is a fallen spiritual power accepting praise meant only for God. The ultimate destiny of the gods. The Bible actually predicts the final court date for these entities. Psalm 82 is a fascinating courtroom drama. Wait, what? Psalm 82 is a fascinating courtroom drama where God stands up in the heavenly council and directly addresses these territorial sons of God who took over the nations. It says, I said, you are gods, sons of the Most High, all of you. Nevertheless, like men you shall die and fall like any prince. That's Psalm 82, 6-7. From Genesis to the New Testament, the message is consistent. The global pantheons of history aren't just empty space. They are the domains of cosmic rebels. But the ultimate goal of the Christian message was to announce that through the resurrection, Jesus was reclaiming all the nations from these entities. Well, that is fascinating. I never knew that. So that'll be cool to, because we're going to read, we're 2 Peter 2. We have the book of John, 1 John, 1 John, 1 John, 1 John, long John, 1 John, 2 John, 3 John, Jude, and then Revelation, and then we'll be starting our Old Testament read, and then we'll get to learn, or rather get to read all of this stuff firsthand, all of these references to the Old Testament that we keep coming across. Okay, now what verse was that? That went on a very long tangent. Gosh. That was 2 Peter 2:16. 2 Peter 2:16. There we go. Verse 17. These are waterless springs and mist driven by a storm. For them the gloom of utter darkness has been reserved. For speaking loud boast of folly, they entice by sensual passions of the flesh those who are barely escaping from those who live in error. They promise them freedom, but they themselves are slaves of corruption. For whatever overcomes a person, to that he is enslaved. For whatever overcomes a person, to that he is enslaved. For if, after they have escaped the defilements of the world through the knowledge of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, they are again entangled in them and overcome, the last state has become worse for them than the first. For it would have been better for them never to have known the way of righteousness than after knowing it to turn back from the holy commandment delivered to them. Nay, What the true proverb says has happened to them. The dog returns to its own vomit, and the sow, after washing herself, returns to wallow in the mire. Wait, what? What does that mean? Explain. Sounds important. This verse uses incredible, vivid, graphic imagery to make a point about human nature, specifically regarding spiritual and moral backsliding. To understand what it means, it helps to look at the context of the book of 2 Peter. The Old Testament origin of the phrase and the core message about internal versus external change. So first, the context, false teachers and apostasy, which is apostasy, renunciation of belief, the abandonment or renunciation of a religious or political belief. Oh, okay. So backsliding. Okay. In chapter 2 of his second letter, the apostle Peter is warning the early Christian church about false teachers. He describes people who had learned about the way of righteousness, associated themselves with the Christian community, and escaped the moral defilement of the world. However, they eventually turned away from those teachings, falling back into their old destructive habits and dragging others down with them. Peter uses this quote to describe the ultimate tragedy of someone who pretends to change or temporarily changes only to return to their old ways. Okay, second, the cultural and biblical background. Peter is actually pulling from two different sources here. The dog. This is a direct quote from the Old Testament book of Proverbs 26:11. It reads, "Like a dog that returns to his vomit is a fool who repeats his folly." Oh, I see. Like a dog that returns to his vomit is a fool who repeats his folly. In the ancient Near East, dogs weren't viewed as pampered household pets. They were scavengers. Second, the sow, or a pig. This was likely a well-known secular proverb or folk saying at the time. Pigs were considered ceremonially unclean animals in Jewish culture. Okay. The core lesson, nature versus behavior. The primary theological and practical point Peter is making centers on nature. When a dog eats something bad, its body naturally rejects it and throws it up. The vomit represents the toxic, bad habits of the past. But because it is still just a dog with a scavenger's nature, it looks at the very thing that made it sick and considers it food again. Dang. That's a great analogy. The pig, you can take a mud-loving pig, scrub her clean, put a ribbon on her, and keep her in a clean house. But the moment you let her outside, she will run straight for the nearest mud hole, i.e. wallow in the mire. Why? Because washing the outside of the pig didn't change her DNA. She is still a pig, and pigs love mud. So Peter is using these raw examples to say that superficial change is temporary. If a person only changes their outer behavior to fit in with their religious or moral crowd, but their inner heart and desires never actually change, they will eventually They will eventually gravity pull back. That doesn't make sense. They will eventually be pulled back to their old life. The verse warns against the deception of a reformed lifestyle that lacks a true, permanent change of heart. Brum, brum. All right. What was why does it keep bopping me back to okay. Oh, that was the end. Okay, so 2 Peter 3. So we just hit our 30-minute mark, so that's a good stopping point. So we'll pick it up tomorrow on 2 Peter 3, verse 1. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to drop a sub, share it with a friend. God bless you guys, and good night.